I've got it recording now.
So it's 10 years.
Not long, isn't it?
About 10 years. One year today since Julian arrested. And I've got photos in the background. I know you're not very clear.
Yeah. Where's Kishore?
I was in meeting too.
But yes, I think it's
Hello. Lights, camera, action.
On Wikileaks the other day, they posted something on Twitter, which was a comment by Vaughn Smith, who provided sanctuary to Julian Assange back in 2010 in his country home in Norfolk in the UK. He's a freelance journalist and libertarian. And he wrote, Julian Assange called me. His incarceration in the time of COVID-19 threatens his life. Julian is now confined alone in a cell for 23 and a half hours every day. He gets half an hour of exercise, and that is in a yard crowded with other prisoners. With over 150 Belmarsh prison staff off work, self-isolating, the prison is barely functioning. We know of 2 COVID-19 deaths in Belmarsh so far, though the Department of Justice have only admitted to 1 death. Julian told me that there have been more and that the virus is ripping through the prison. The Prison Governors Association recently advised that 15,000 non-violent prisoners should be released to give British jails a chance of managing COVID-19. The Department of Justice suggested releasing 4,000 prisoners, but as of a few days ago, only about 100 had actually been released. Julian is only on remand and is obviously non-violent, but he's not one of them. The magistrate, Vanessa Barrister, ruled against bail for Julian when his lawyers applied for it last week. Despite COVID-19, Julian's hearing has been confirmed to still somehow start on the 18th of May. And Julian is convinced that this is happening to disadvantage him legally. Unable to meet with his lawyers, he cannot prepare his defence properly. Julian Assange is a political prisoner and his treatment is a national disgrace. While Iran has responded to COVID-19 by letting Nazan Zaghari Ratcliffe out of prison, British justice is being gamed against Julian in a further act of cowardly vengeance. So that was just the other day he wrote that.
Yeah,
I agree with that.
it's disgusting how they're treating him. He is a vulnerable person.
They want him dead. That's
They
what
do.
it is, right? They want him dead. There's no
Yeah,
other way
they
to
do.
interpret that, right? Why
No.
would you keep someone in a prison where you know that the virus is running rampant unless you wanted that person dead?
And they know those institutions like prisons are terrible places. The World Health Organization, I believe, said they should all be released, these, low-risk prisoners. So it's absolutely disgusting. And they're precisely the people who are dying of this COVID-19, are the people who are vulnerable like Julian Assange.
Exactly. Yeah. And you can see it. And I know I'm going to keep harping on, Stephen, but if you look at the statistics of the deaths in New York City, they are the poorest communities who are dying. So the people can't afford rents in New York.
Yeah.
The people can't afford to buy property in New York. The ones who have to share accommodation because rents are so expensive. So they're huddled together, right? They can't go anywhere because they don't have a property outside. They're tied to their jobs because their wages are so poor, right? And they are the ones that are dying.
They're also afraid. They're also afraid to seek medical advice because they can't afford to get it. And according to Knut Wittkowski, if you get the virus, you have a chance of getting pneumonia. And a lot of people who are old will not seek medical advice because they're worried about the cost. And all they need is antibiotics. The antibiotics will get them through the pneumonia. If you wait too long, it's too late. And so those people will die of the pneumonia. They don't die of the virus, they die of the pneumonia. The virus makes you susceptible to pneumonia. And then if you get pneumonia, then you are, well, it's a very dangerous thing to have, pneumonia.
And the other thing I want to say, something very close to my heart, is that many of those workers, and I know it's not about Julian, but it is in a way, in an indirect sense, right? But many of those workers do not have legal status in the country. They are there, so they're undocumented. So if they were to present themselves to a medical facility, they would be risking deportation, right?
Yes.
And so they're stuck between this nightmare of the political system in the United States and the nightmare of the biological disaster. What a place to be.
Well, it's being mismanaged. It's clearly being mismanaged.
And I think the judge's reasoning for not releasing Julian is just Orwellian. She said that he's not serving a custodial sentence and therefore he's not eligible. It's mind-blowing.
It is. They'll just say black is white and white is black, you know, when it comes to Julian. I just despair at this point.
Yep.
Just feel really, really tearful about him.
I'm sorry, Meg.
Sorry, Max, too. It's just evil. These people are psychopaths. We have psychopaths running our political system. And it is Orwellian, and it is just puts us in despair. We just have to take a leaf out of Tony's book and just keep trying to have some faith in people. My local member is Anthony Albanese, and I tried contacting his office, and I was not only stonewalled, they told me that any emails, because I'd been emailing for weeks and months, asking what their stance was as far as Julian was concerned, and it was around the time of the election. And not only was I told that if they received any emails regarding Julian Assange, it would be automatically put in the junk mail, that this woman was filled with venom and vitriol. And in the end, I said to her, but this is an Australian citizen. We really need to protect him. And she said, well, that's what society's like now. And I broke out, and I'm not one to cry at the drop of a hat, but she just really upset me to think that this is the leader of the opposition, and the Labor Party, when I was growing up, was the party of the people, and that's how they think.
As
I really don't know, because that really upset me. And it shows the contempt that they hold for the people. These politicians hold us.
Well, that's right, Karen. That's right. I mean, go on, Tony.
As I was about to say earlier, the greatest service that Julian Assange is doing for us is identifying that 5%. You know how we talked about the 1% and the 5%?
Yes.
And the 5% are riding on the gravy train with the 1% and vigorously protecting the 1% against the 94%, I guess it is. Julian's activities have polarised the world. And people like Anthony Albanese, and in fact the entire Australian Labor Party, are quite clearly lockstep with the 1%. We now know that. We now know that there is absolutely nothing to be gained by approaching the Australian Labor Party. I mean, I've sent out all the letters. I can tell you, I've sent out all the emails to all these bloody politicians, and I don't even get a reply. I don't even get them saying, you know, they don't do you the service of that fundamental courtesy. And, you know, to my way of thinking, they will be damned. And getting back to this point, how can I stay positive? I can stay positive because these idiots, these 5% who want to stand behind the 1% and think that they've got right on their side or they've got the power on their side, they're kidding. They're kidding themselves, because ultimately they're identified. You know, it's like this bloody judge. I mean, what sort of an idiot is she to think that she can carry out a normal life after this obscene behaviour of hers? I mean, it's just simply gobsmacking her foolishness. So all I can say is, you know, God save them, because, you know, there's nobody else that's going to look out for them, because the 94% will win. There's no doubt about that. But, you know, it's going to take time, because we've got opposition from this bloody 4 or 5% who are going to protect the 1%. But, you know, ultimately they will fall.
So look, so Julian's in prison. It's clear that this subhuman, well, she calls herself a human being, Baritza is not going to soften and release him. As has been pointed out, they just want him to die in prison. What do we do? What do we do? There's no point writing, as Karen has pointed out, there's no point writing to politicians.
Well, he did come out this week, a couple of days ago, Andrew Wilkie, and he did call for the release of Julian because of the COVID disease. So he has been consistent in his compassion, and he seems, yes, and support. Thanks, Tony. He seems to be a good man who really does want to help Julian. I know there's few and far between in the political system, but he has been consistent. I think he really is like calling out the Australian Parliament and is calling for the release of Julian. He may be a lonely voice in the Parliament, but he really is trying. So I think contacting him, at least you're going to get a sympathetic ear.
And look, the other thing to remember is that he only gets the voice that the mainstream media give him. Like,
Exactly.
It's going to be very it's going to be very interesting. It's going to be very interesting to see what is reported on the news this evening on the first anniversary of this insane incarceration. You know, what are our media going to say tonight about our citizen Julian Assange and his year in solitary confinement? I mean, are they going to speak up? And if they don't, shame on them. Shame on the ABC if they don't give a good slab of segment to their news broadcast tonight. You know, this is what I was saying earlier. Julian is sorting out who's on what side, you know. Who are we going to trust in the future? Are we going to trust the ABC in the future? Or are we going to say, oh, the ABC is a bunch of shills? You know, they're just backing up mainstream media propaganda nonsense. Or are we going to say, oh, look what the ABC did? You know, they spoke up for it. But I'm inclined to be a little bit harsher on the ABC than I am on those, what I believe, very brave 14 politicians. They're not going to get any criticism from me because they've stood up and they're counted. They're counted as members of our parliament that are standing up for an Australian citizen, and they're 14 out of 100 and something. You know, they're like, you know, around 10% of the voice of our parliament. But that makes them all the more brave. You know, they're lone voices. And you know, as we've pointed out before, they're not bound by any political colour. You know, they're from every corner of the political spectrum. They're from.
The problem is they're not getting heard even.
That's right. That's what I'm saying. It's the media that deserves our criticism. And in particular, the Australian Broadcasting Commission, I think, is reprehensible on this part. You know, I mean, even when they did that Four Corners thing on Julian Assange, that was so biased.
Oh, it was terrible.
I mean,
terrible.
God,
It did him no favours whatsoever, that programme. It was hideous, absolutely hideous.
That was the program hosted by Michael Brissenden.
Yes.
it was those American soldiers talking like a bunch of cowboys that chilled me to the bone. Not so much the imagery, because the imagery was so blurred, you know, you didn't see the true gore and horror of those little kids being taken off and put into it. But you heard that the CEO from base say, "Oh, don't take them to our military hospital, just drop them off at the local police station." You know, the blatant disregard was just chilling to the bone. And yet all of that audio was dubbed out of that Four Corners thing, you know.
It was terribly
horrible.
Terribly biased. Terribly biased.
And they could, I am sure they could have had Niels Meltzer on there, and I complained about that. But they said, oh, it didn't fit the timing of the whatever. But I'm sure they could have had. I mean, it was a month after Niels Meltzer had announced his finding.
I mean, I knew it was 10 years since the release of the Collateral murder video. It's been 10 years this week.
Yeah.
Ten years since that video was released, and none of the people who committed that atrocity have been prosecuted. None of them.
No.
The only
Not only have the soldiers not prosecuted, but the people who launched the initial invasion, who took the decision to invade Iraq, have not been prosecuted either. people talk about keeping politicians, holding politicians to account. No one is holding them to account. Nobody.
No.
Including our
We are
ABC.
Including
We
the
are basically in a bubble, and we're only speaking to the people who we agree with
Yeah, exactly.
on the large.
right now. So I tell you what I did this morning, Steve. I tell you what I did this morning, right? Because today there's supposed to be the virtual march happening on Facebook globally, right? So what I did something kind of which I've never done before. I got one of the posters that's circulating on social media, and I went through my list and I must have tagged about maybe 60 or 70 people, and I just tagged them and I asked them to spread it, right? But I just want to point this one thing out, right? All of you have to ask yourself this question, because yes, to us it's reasonable that Julian be released, right? It's perfectly rational, reasonable, within the rights of the law, but yet these people are not operating in that paradigm. So then you have to ask yourself the question, well, what then? How does an innocent person plead for their release from criminals? And if you can't answer that question, if you're unable to answer that question, you really need to examine how you move forward. You really do. Some self-reflection.
Well, it's what you said last week. We have to communicate to the working class. I kind of believe, I believe that is the truth. The working class includes everyone in the 99%, I would say.
Let's understand that these judges are being pulled by powers above them. Do we recognise that? Is that a fair claim to make?
Yes.
Well,
Yeah, definitely.
Yes, and they're in the position they're in because someone has pulled the strings to get them.
Someone is pulling their strings, right? So someone is pulling, because really, if there weren't, on a legal basis, there's no reason to keep Julian in prison on a legal basis. There's no foundation, right? And these are learned people of the law, right? These are people who know the law. Michael Kirby said so. Michael Kirby, former Australian High Court Justice, has said that his incarceration is a breach of due process, right? So it's patent to everyone that these judges who are presiding over Julian's case are not, they recognise what the law is and they know they are breaking it. So therefore, they're being manipulated by people above them. Presumably, I'd say people like Mike Pompeo, Donald Trump, the US State Department, right? These people are demanding. The CIA, these people, how do you win a legal argument with the CIA?
You can't.
Ask yourself that question. How do you win a legal argument? These people are murderers.
Yeah.
The whole Russiagate thing was a total nonsense. And yet it occupied the mainstream media, and they had absolutely no evidence apart from a few, I forget how many, but a handful of ads posted by some obscure PR firm in Russia, which nobody saw. Someone must have seen them, and I think most of the ones they identified happened after the election. Yeah. So it was all absolute nonsense.
I agree with you, Steve. Yeah.
But they have the power over the public. The CIA has the power over the public.
I mean, we just had the CIA probably intrude in the Zoom call. Karen, were you on it? I don't know if you were. It was outrageous. Tony, maybe you were on just.
Yep.
I mean, I'm still reeling from it, to be honest.
Yeah.
And there were obviously more than like there were, I think, 5 at least. And I mean, there probably were backups after that before we ended up cutting it. But as soon as we kicked one out, the next one did it, and then the next one. So that was an orchestrated maneuver.
Disruptors, they're called.
Mm.
I mean, these people are just psychopaths, and they don't have the moral compass that we do as just general people who I think are good, with good conscience. These people don't act in a normal fashion. They're just evil. I have no other description of them.
Yeah.
Even Trump, even if you look at Trump, right? Because Trump, he said famously that, you know, he loves WikiLeaks, quote unquote. Do you remember that, people?
About 1 million times.
Remember that? And so, but he's changed his tune since. He has changed his tune. And that must mean that people have got to, even to him. So then we start to talk about the nature of power in the United States. Because that's where we have to really start to raise the issue, right? Is it possible for the United States, right? Is it within the because it's a capitalist country, right? The military-industrial complex and their corporations, they run the whole show, right? They run the American Congress, they run the White House, they run the departments of I call it the Department of Offense, because no one is ever going to attack the United States. It will never have to defend itself, right? Because no one would ever even begin to launch a war against the United States, right? Because it'll just be suicide, right? So it's the Department of Defense, it's the State Department. These organizations are run by what they call the oligarchy, right? A group of rich individuals that determine the foreign policy and the domestic policy of the United States. These people have to be removed from power. You know, that's a revolutionary question. Right? That's you're not going to get even Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders would not even defend Julian Assange.
No,
wouldn't even defend him. The only party that defended Julian unconditionally for the last 10 years is the Socialist Equality Party. I had an exchange on Facebook yesterday. There was a lady in the United States who had Josph Kishore is the SCP candidate in the presidential election, and she wanted me to prove that he was for Julian Assange. So what I did is I went to the World Socialist website, to their search engine, to their search bar. I typed in Julian Assange, Josph Kishore as the author, and I found an article that he wrote in 2010 defending Julian Assange before this, you know how, so, and if you look at their record, the record is consistent. They've been the only one to defend Julian consistently over the entire decade. And that's a tremendous record, right? And they're the only political force in the United States that are raising this, right? Bernie Sanders never did, not even once. Never once did he defend Julian Assange.
No, he was given the chance. A young journalist, Dack, Rouleau, asked him directly, and he fobbed it. You know, like, I can't talk about that. Yeah.
After the election or something, I think.
Yeah, exactly. So he was
That's given way to Joe Biden. Joe Biden has called Julian Assange a cyber terrorist. You know, that's the state of play.
So, Pietro, okay, so what is the solution now then for Julian? Obviously, we cannot rely on the politicians. What is the solution now to how do we move forward from here?
Yeah. Well, look,
how do we move forward?
We continue what we're doing. We continue to rally the 99%. We don't give up. We continue to build numbers. Like, 10 years ago, the world was split in half by Julian Assange. Half the world thought he was a complete arsehole, and half the world thought he was a hero. That figure has shifted dramatically towards a lot more than half the world thinking he's the hero, and a lot less than half the world thinking he's a ratbag. And that number is constantly shifting, and I think it's shifting at an ever-increasing rate. And the more they publicly persecute him, the more the troops rally, and the more effective are our actions. And we've just got to stay on it, like just don't give up. I mean, you know, it's like if you lean against the Queen Mary, eventually the Queen Mary will move, you know? No, it's true, you know?
Yeah.
Eventually it moves. And I believe that. And if we can just get more and more people to sign that petition, and more people, you know, just every single person counts. We've just got to, as Julian himself said, a lake consists of drops of rain, you know? A lake, an ocean consists of drops of rain, you know? We've just got to keep building those numbers one by one. You know, one by one, we've got to just build the opposition to the point where the 1%, where the 5% that support the 1% say, this is getting unsupportable, we've got to abandon the 1%, and we've got to come across to the 95%.
But how do we do that, Tony? That's how, when we can't be on the streets, we can't be a public force, we can't, you know, we're all housebound. How do we do it? How do we make our voices heard?
Well, the two ways I'm doing it is I'm spending a lot of time on the computer, you know, posting stuff, sending emails, but also I've got big banners on the front of my house encouraging people to sign the petition. And if I see locals in the street, I take the time one by one to get them, encourage them to just go and sign that petition. And I'm getting more and more locals doing that. And every time I get one more person to do it, you know, it's one more person that signed it. It's one more person on our side. And every single person counts. You know, at the end of the day, we're going to win this with numbers, you know. It's just going to be pure numbers.
I think quantity is definitely an issue, but so is quality. The quality of the opposition, the quality of the message that we advance to people. Because a lot of people will be thinking the same as what we are, you know, what do we do, you know? They would be thinking the same thing. What do we do? And a lot of them would judge, you know, you can't beat the CIA, you know, or so on and so forth. I know it's, I don't have much good news, people. I don't.
I've got some also bad news that happened that we just got. So in Melbourne, they did tried to do a whole series of like car rallies. So everybody were in their own car doing the proper social distancing, and were trying to sort of help the refugees, but also there were union sort of things for, you know, like workers that not being looked after by job seeker, JobKeeper, whatever, quite a few things. And the person who was organising, police came to his home and had arrested him. He's been charged with, I've got to get the wording right, it's charged for incitement, which is apparently no one's been charged with this since the 50s or something like that.
Inciting? Really?
Incitement, yes. I mean, look, more is going to come out. It was just literally announced in that Zoom call.
Do you know his name?
It was mentioned, but I don't remember it. I don't remember. There'll be more news. I mean, it may even appear in the news because it's that big. So, and then they all got charged. All the people that were in the car rally have been charged.
Oh,
I think
my God.
each car. So,
yeah.
I mean, this is COVID-19 times.
They were practicing social distancing, right?
Right, yeah.
Yeah, they're in their cars, you know.
Yes.
Well,
Yeah,
this is.
But hang on, guys, hang on. Before we get carried away here, I heard about a couple that were going up the north coast in their car on an Easter holiday, and the police pulled them over, and because they were not staying at home, which is what you're supposed to do in New South Wales and Victoria, because they're in their car a long way from home, they both got a $1,000 fine, as did the health minister in the current state government, who went to his Pearl Beach house. You know, he got a $1,000 fine and had to quit his position. I mean, the point is that absolutely. So, you know, the point is we're taking this COVID-19 seriously. That's why we're not meeting at town hall anymore. You know, that's why we're doing this online stuff. That's why we've got to restrict ourselves to working online and putting signs. The only place we can legally put a sign up is on the front of our house.
Okay.
I did more signs, Tony. I was going to put some in the park because there's loads of people in Sydney Park walking. And if I do that at night or early morning, I don't think I'm doing anything wrong. What do you think, Danny?
I'd be do your little jogging as you post. You know, you're doing your little exercise and you're jogging at the same time, or walking your dog.
Watch out for video cameras.
Yes, I will. That's good.
I mean, it seems like maybe the movement had grown so big. Maybe we're bigger than we realise all across the world, and maybe, you know, this is part of the restriction. I mean, we don't. COVID is a rare. You know, there's a lot of like discussion about is it really as dangerous and whatever. I mean, what if the whole Julian Assange movement, they want to stop it? I don't know.
Well, that's what I've wondered. That's what I've wondered, that we've been so successful, and and they would have known that Belmarsh would have been absolutely saturated on the 18th of May. I've wondered that it's a big effort to silence dissident voices and, you know, disempower everybody.
Disempower us,
and you know, the fact that this person has been charged in Melbourne, that is absolutely atrocious. I mean, you know, it's practicing social distancing. You're in a car, but what's the difference of that to being in your house? There's absolutely no difference. And this is what I find so terrifying, that this move to a totalitarian state has just swept the world without question. We're all very obedient. We've all been, you know, really very obedient, and just doing what we're told. How do we really know how big this supposed virus actually is? And, you know, there are ways to protect yourself. You take vitamin C, vitamin D, you take zinc, you eat well, you drink lots of water, you know, you have lemon every day for your vitamin C. They don't tell you that in the mainstream media. It's all about social distancing and keeping us isolated in our bedrooms like little naughty children. And I think it's absolutely terrifying, and I don't know what is going to come from this, whether it's going to be a mass vaccine program worldwide and you have to have a vaccine. I would imagine that's the next step. But I have wondered if we're just being silenced because we've been so successful in speaking out against the incarceration of Julian.
Yeah, well, I feel that the COVID-19 thing is extremely linked. It's affecting everyone, and there's so much bullshit about it that we should research it thoroughly, and it is tied to Julian Assange. So I feel it's an important thing to understand what, for example, why did Australia have, oh yeah, kids can go to school, and other countries, no, kids can't go to school? There's bullshit going on, isn't there? To anybody that just looks at it. But if you look at the epidemiologists, Knut Wittkowski, he's a total top guy. He's 20 years head of the biostatistics statistics. He's a professor at the Rockefeller University, and he says it's wrong. What this whole thing of flattening the curve is completely the wrong thing to do if you want to protect old people. You have to have the faster it goes, the better, and isolate the old and vulnerable people, and then you get herd immunity, and then you can allow the old and vulnerable people back into society because this herd immunity has been established. But what we're doing is delaying herd immunity forever. Because in Australia, we're not, it's kind of hardly anyone's getting infected by it. It's crazy. And I'm sure people are going to get annoyed with this COVID-19 restriction. But at the moment, whenever I say anything on YouTube, on Twitter, I get attacked like I've said something deadly wrong. So I'm not sure that it's the right approach, but I think if you stay with the truth, that is the important thing. If you can stay with it, it will see you through. If you go down the track of trying to be political, trying to, I better not upset these people, which it's hard not to do. But I think, I think you've got to be careful. You don't rub people's faces in it, but it's still, have a look at Knut Wittkowski, have a look at that video. And it's a very interesting, about an hour or 40 minutes or something like that. And it's just mind-blowing. We're doing all the wrong stuff. And it's not just him. It's a lot of, there's another article by the Off Guardian, 12 renowned people saying very similar kinds of things. They're different, they're coming from a different angle, but basically, and the economy crashing is terrible to kill people. You make the economy terrible, and then people, they lose their jobs, they get depressed, they haven't got enough money, their health care, they're going, it's, I feel that could be an avenue to look at the truth, because this is only last week that I realized that there was anything against the flattening of the curve. I thought it was just sensible to try and flatten the curve. But if you want to stop people going to hospital, you don't flatten the curve, but you flatten the curve for old people and, people at risk like Julian Assange. You try to get them away from where that virus is. Of course, they've got him in the worst place where it's just going everywhere without, just like on one of those cruise ships. It's just floating through the whole air conditioner. Who knows what it's doing?
Christian Hassan said this week it's like a petri dish.
Yes, which is kind of good, but of course a virus will not replicate in a petri dish, unfortunately.
True. It was a good visualisation.
Of course, and it kind of does work, it's metaphorical, so you can still say yes. So, but
the one thing that I think the COVID-19 lockdown is showing, like masses of people, is how awful isolation is, how awful lack of freedom is. And so if that continues for the 3 months or the 6 months, people have got to be now, visualising what has Julian been subjected to, 23.5 hours a day apparently right now. But, it was 22 to 23 a year. And I think that's got to get more people, that'll win people over, because I think they'll think, how did this man do it? And why did this man have to do this? Why did they have to not give him house arrest and the man is not charged with anything, in England. So why have they done that? It doesn't. This makes no sense.
Obviously, they've got their agenda, haven't they? But that's
the whole point of Julian being persecuted, crucified, Father Dack puts it, is exactly what the Romans used to do to people. They'd nail them up to a bit of wood and let them die slowly in front of the people as an example of what happens to people that act against the state. And there is no difference to what the Americans are doing to Julian Assange. I personally don't believe they firstly want him dead, because if they wanted him dead, he would have been dead 33 years ago when he first became an irritant to them.
Yes.
And at least they would have killed him 10 years ago.
But it's for our benefit. It's not for the general public, because it's not on TV. If it was on TV, I think the general public would be on our side. But I think what it is people who are like activists who are wanting to stop Julian from dying in prison, or make him free, or him continue his work. Those are the people, or people who might think they will continue doing his kind of work. They're the people that's aimed at. And they know we've got it all through our social media. We're able to see it. But the general public don't know anything about it, more or less. You know, so many times at town hall that people, oh, where is he now? Or, you know, that's kind of, they mostly know that he exists and kind of know what he did. They might have it a bit wrong, but they kind of know who he is. But they don't really, I mean, how could they? The media is virtually, he doesn't exist on the media. So
they scared the media.
Yeah, no, he's been demonised on the media through the misinformation that the media spread around. Yeah. He's been demonised. So somehow we think, oh, well, if he's locked up in solitary confinement, let him face them. He's a threat to our national security. I think a lot of people still believe all this malarkey about the war on terror and the fact that he's siding with the terrorists. You know, somehow this rapist ratbag is siding with terrorists and undermining the fundamental security of the quote-unquote free world. I mean, there's a lot of people that have swallowed that and haven't yet kind of undone that. But at the same token, as I said the other day, you know, a 14-year-old son of a friend of mine saw my sign up on the front of the house, and I said, tell me 2 things you know about Julian Assange. And he said, oh, he's been tortured in solitary confinement, and the whole world knows about it. And I thought, well, yeah, pretty much we all do know about it, but we accept it because we're still sort of scared of terrorism. We still somehow, a certain percentage of us, believe that terrorism is a threat to us, and secondly, that he's sort of on the terrorist side and he's against, you know, our great saviour, the United States of America. Now, I believe that proportion of people is evaporating. I believe they're waking up, and that's our job. Our job is to wake them up one by one and get them to sign the petition and build those numbers and get a bit.
Yeah, sorry. I think that we've got to wake them up about COVID-19 as well. And there are very good, I think we've got a lot of top people who we need to promote, who are very convincing.
Well, Steve, the other way to look at it is COVID-19 has changed the way the world operates. And some people think it's a permanent change. You know, I was reading an article by a futurist the other day, and he said he's asked all the time, what's going to happen after COVID-19?
Yeah.
And he doesn't believe there's such a world as a post-COVID-19
Well, it's probably China. Will probably be like people.
China is now living under the most authoritarian regime. Everybody has to download an app on their phone.
Yeah.
The same thing's happening in Italy too. Before you step out your front door, you've got to download a form off the internet, and you've got to fill out, your name and address and all the blah 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 blah, and the purpose of your journey and where you're going, and carry that piece of paper with you. When the carbonari pull you over, you've got to produce that piece of paper that justifies your stepping out of your home. The same thing's happening in China. They're being followed with their mobile phones. They've got apps on their phone that monitor their temperature and heart rate. I mean, this is what we're heading for.
Yeah,
and so what I think we've got to do is we've got to accept that this is the new world order, and how we can now be most effective in this new world order.
Yeah.
And the fact that we're all stuck at home and we're all spending a lot more time on our computers is the time for us to stop thinking about advertising in the outdoor world and start thinking about advertising in this virtual world and spreading the message through the virtual world. And hopefully we can, do even better online than we could in the real world. Hopefully the virtual world, and I do believe it's potentially more powerful than the real world. Because when we were standing outside town hall for 1 hour a week, we got through to 20 people, 50 people, I don't know what it was, but there's 6 or 8 or 10 of us, and if we spend more than an hour a day, for example, that's 6 or 8 person hours a day, and we've got the potential to convert a lot more than 20 people.
Yes, but Tony, the reason I went to town hall was because I felt that on social media it was doing nothing. It's like when I first went on social media, I was getting new followers, and I would get retweets. I was learning as I went, but I would get, wow, I've got 100 retweets. Now it's very hard for me to get 100 retweets. At that time I had 30 followers. Now I've got 4,000 or something followers, and yet I can still only get about 100 retweets. Sometimes I get a few more, but why? Doesn't make sense.
But Steve, every week when you put the town hall gathering up, I repost it on my Facebook, and I get more and more of my people that'll sit down and watch. It used to be an hour or 30 minutes. That last one was 2 hours and 20 minutes, and the number of my contacts that listened to that 2 hours and 20 minutes of our conversation and liked it, is encouraging, because we're spreading the message.
We have to be courageous.
Yeah.
And not lose faith. Not lose faith in the fact that there's 1% of people trying to stop 99% of people. I hate to go back to that boring 99 versus 1, but that's the reality. Julian is representing the 99%. He's on the winning side. The 1% are going to resort to desperate measures because nothing is going to save them. Ultimately, they are going down. Just history. Look back through history. People that try and control through terror, intimidation, and all, they fail. They come down, and the bigger they are, the harder they fall. We have just got to remain strong, and we have got to believe that we're on the right side, and we have got to believe that we've got 99% of the world behind us. And if we stay on that path, we are going to win. We are. It's a cast iron guarantee that I'll give you. We can't fail unless we all give up and throw our hands in the air and say, oh, what's the use, we're up against these multi-trillionaires who run
That's
the...
what they want. Yeah.
But
We're not doing that.
No.
they're a handful of twisted individuals. They're a handful of mentally ill, psychotic individuals. And just like Adolf Hitler and Caesar and, you know, Louis XIV and all the other idiots that have tried to do this in the past, they will not succeed. And, you know, at the end of the day, if they close down the internet, there's a group called Anonymous, right? And their unofficial leader is Julian Assange. And Anonymous will bring the world to their knees. The 1% have no defense against Anonymous. Anonymous have all the power. They are the ones that control the internet. They're like Julian. You know, Julian's been in charge of the internet since he was 15. You know, he hacked into the CIA when he was a school kid because he's got that knowledge. And he started I believe he started that movement, that Anonymous movement. And, you know, they're sitting there watching this more closely than we are, and they're ready to act. If something happens to Julian, look out the establishment, because they're going to really rile the tiger. The tiger will rise up and bite them on the bum, and there can be no surer thing than that. You know.
So Tony, okay. So just to really clarify and pinpoint, what can we, the 99%, do? You say we just continue as we're doing, but
yeah.
For me, what I was doing is I was holding street stalls, I was going to cafes, talking to people, I was putting out leaflets, I was writing, you know, letters and publishing them on the set site. I was holding meetings, I was running a group. We were very, very active, and we've been like that for a year, and will come to a stop. So aside from, like you say that you're emailing, who are you emailing? You know, what do we do with the internet? How do we?
Right, okay. Who do we email? We go through our contacts list, and we go through them one by one, and we look, oh, is that friend of mine so-and-so? I wonder if they're aware. And if the answer's, I'm not sure, then we type out a little personal email to, you know, Joe Blow or whoever it is, and, you know, make contact with them, and then, you know, attach the link and try and get them to sign the petition. Get them on board, you know, get that one person on board. It's all about one person at a time. Forget trying to change. You know, if we all try and get one person a day, let's say the 6 of us get one person a day to sign that petition. And, you know, let's say that out of, you know, the 100 people we get in the next week, 10% of those decide that they're going to spread that word. You know, it's a bit like COVID. You know, we've got to treat this as a thing that's going to grow. And all growth follows what's called an exponential curve. The larger the group get, the faster it grows, just like a virus. If you've got 10 people growing at, you know, 10% a week, you know, you get to 100 after a month or two. If you've got 100,000 people doing it, you get to 1 million people. You know, the growth expands as the group gets bigger. And let's face it, this group is getting bigger. There is no way we're getting smaller. There is no way we are losing people. I bet there's not one person that supports Julian Assange has dropped off the twig and thought, oh no, he really does deserve to be, you know, crucified. It's the other way around. It's the people who 5 years ago thought that he was a ratbag, have found out that he's not a ratbag, have found out that he helped the Victorian police break pedophile rings, have found out, you know, the good things about it. They've found out about all the journalism awards. They've found out about how Wikileaks have 100% accuracy, that they've been to court 1,000 times and not yet once had to withdraw one word of anything. That they are, you know, this group is growing. We are growing. And as long as we grow, we should feel we're doing our job. And as long as we're, you know, spending whatever time we can afford on social media, on email, And so to answer your question, we can't do it in public anymore. You know, COVID-19, and I think the best thing to do is just to accept that, not to try and fight against COVID-19, say, rightio, COVID-19 set up a new set of parameters, is set up a new set of boundaries.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Well, I think we just need to stand together too, and in solidarity, and support each other as best we can. And
Yes.
and I know we feel dreadful some days because we get bad news, like this week with the magistrate denying bail, which is terribly disheartening and unfair and unjust. But we just have to rally behind each other and support each other, and don't give up, as Tony said.
Well, yeah, and I think, you know, educate, like Tony was saying, I think what we need, rather than be emailing politicians who are doing nothing for him, because they're all part of the great war machine, so they're not going to stand up for him. It's a waste of time. But yeah, I think, you know, this petition, if that grows and government, if that can get to 1 million, if we can get that to 1 million, they might start to take notice. I don't know where it's at now, and Tony's dropped off, so he can't tell us. But if it gets to 1 million,
I think it's nearly 400,000, isn't it?
Yeah, okay. It's growing. It's slow. The growth is slow, but I think we need to get it to 1 million. And I think Tony's idea there of, yes, educating each, our friends, relatives, organisations, even different organisations, writing to them, emailing them and telling them about Julian and getting them on site. Local shops, I mean, there's all sorts that I suppose that, we could do in that way, but
do it all.
Karen, I think it's probably a good idea to start sending that petition out, and just sending an email just saying, are you aware of what's happened to Julian Assange, and sending that to as many people as we can, and like I say, shops, organisations.
Yeah, I will. I think this one that Tony gave us was really good. It says take a photo of this address, and then onto the petition, Philip Adams' petition. And I thought when he said, please photograph at the top, is such a simple and good idea, because if you take a photo, people aren't going to remember. So if they take a photo and if they just Google Julian Assange, Philip Adams, and they'll get onto that petition. So yeah, I thought that was a really good idea.
Okay.
Good.
Hello.
Hello.
Pietro.
Lights, camera, action, take 3.
You've always wanted to do that.
I could be, we've got the director right here, we've got the stars, right? We've got the stars all ready to go. We're, lights, camera, action, roll.
Roll. Pietro, I've got a question.
Yes, Mads.
Who do you think is the oligarchy? Who do you think they are? Who?
Okay, so, well, look, that's a great question, right? It's a great question. And I'll put it down to, you take, for example, those who control the greatest amount of income, right, in the world today, right? So you could literally, I remember Nick Beams explained it. He said you could take the people that control or own or derive from the world economy, a huge proportion of the world economy, of world income, you could fit them all into a couple of buses, right? You could. How many billionaires are there in the world? Would you say there's 1 million of them? Probably not. No, there'd probably be a few thousand, right? But they are literally, they run the they make the political decisions that affect billions of people, including Julian Assange, right? You can bet that if you follow the chain of command, so from the judges who are presiding over Julian Assange's case, to the British government, to the American government, to who pulls. Now, I don't want to try to give air to conspiracy theories, but the people who are carrying out or dictating policy in the American government, you could count them literally on a few hands, right? There would be the Wall Street banks. Now, you've got to ask yourself this: what is the connection between the finance sector and political power in the United States? You know, the finance sector demands war. They demand war. The American economy is a war economy. American capitalism has to go to war, right? Because its economic position has declined in the last 20 years. And from all of that, that's where the crimes begin. Because the crime against Julian ultimately is the crime of war. Because that's that's what Julian revealed, right?
Yeah.
That's what he revealed. It's a crime of war. In America, the American government hadn't said, look, we really stuffed up. We're really ashamed of what we've done. We stuffed up big time. We're sorry to the people of Iraq. We're sorry to the people. They're not going to do that because they keep on going down that, what Trotsky called the tobogganing towards a catastrophe. And they have no way out. They just sent another battle fleet off the coast of Venezuela. They've got the USS Theodore docked in Vietnam. Can you believe that? They've got an American aircraft carrier off the coast of Vietnam. It's bizarre. And so that's where you have to that's where you got to address the issues. The issues have to, it comes down. It comes down to a revolutionary question. Julian's freedom. I have to say, I wish it was. I wish it wasn't. I wish we could just keep on doing what we're doing, and knowing that would release him. But I'm getting to the point. Not just getting there. I've been there for a while. That the question of Julian's freedom, of the freedom of all whistleblowers, of addressing the crimes which the whistleblowers have revealed, is a revolutionary question. That's my point. Right?
Yeah, but how do we have a revolution from the comfort of our armchairs? Because we haven't got any choice.
No, that's true.
Hey?
It's going to be on the streets, okay? It's going to be mobilizing workers. I pick and choose the battles that I fight. And my work, for example, I'm careful about what I say, how I say it, and when I say it. But amongst the people that I work with, my closest colleagues, they know what road I'm on, right? And yeah, it's a battle. There really is a battle. Yeah. There are people at my work, for example, who are disgusted with the way things are going, right?
Yeah.
They see that they are disgusted with the way the world is heading, but they haven't drawn revolutionary conclusions. They haven't, and that's a big battle. That's why, to me, like the work of the SEP, of the WSWS, is essential. It's the linchpin in the grand scheme of things. And their work in the United States with the pandemic, their work in mobilizing workers, in educating workers, their work in raising the consciousness around the Julian Assange story is absolutely critical, right? And that's why
and phenomenal work that they're doing, Pietro, isn't it? It's phenomenal work.
Yeah, phenomenal work.
But you know, like you were saying about conspiracy theories, well, I'm leaning a lot towards that at the moment, and I was reading about Bill Gates, and my goodness, he has had his finger in every single pie, and he is a big promoter of vaccines.
Oh yeah.
And I do wonder if he is much behind what's happening right now.
Yeah. Well, he's one of the billionaires, isn't he? Eh?
He certainly is. He
certainly
certainly is, Pietro.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know,
Silicon,
but that's.
and he's from Silicon Valley.
It's also. Yes, that's right. That's right.
Too,
that's
yeah.
right,
Yeah.
Steve. I mean, the thing is that it's hard to know what's the truth at the moment. It really is. There's so much confusion. It really is hard to know the truth. You know, we've been told about a snake eating a bat, and that started this thing. And you know, I mean,
it seems usual with all these controversial things. They're constructed as controversial. They want people to be fighting against each other. Our task is to find out what the truth really is. I think it's difficult, but I think that's the path we have to take, is to identify when something really is true and when something really is a lie, and that is what Julian Assange has managed to give a lot of.
Yeah.
Of that ability.
Well, that's what I was getting to decipher what's true, and that's why we need him so much now. You know, if only he was available and free and doing his work, we'd know. You know, we would know now what's going on, and without him, I just feel we're a bit lost. Nobody, you know, we're all just stabbing in the wind, really, as to exactly what's going on.
I think, you know what's important? It's because we live in a world where there are significant economic interests associated with promoting a particular line of thought. It's difficult to disentangle the truth from economic interests, right? In a perfect world, where we didn't have vested interests for adopting a particular line, you could basically say, oh, look, you know, this thing really works or it doesn't work, and it wouldn't affect anyone's economic interest, anyone's income or anything like that, right? Because we live in a class society, those kinds of themes, they become confused, they become convoluted, they become distorted, and then it's difficult for anyone to examine something on the merit of the case, because they're always thinking about themselves, who does this benefit, right? And that conjures up all sorts of theories regarding conspiracies and so on and so forth, you know?
Yeah. Well, look, the facts don't fit the narrative, so therefore people have to make up some kind of story to fit that to fit the facts, and of course some of it is extremely weird.
Absolutely, yeah.
But you know, I think all we can do is stay with what we know to be fact, and that, as many people have said, that's outrageous enough. Like in the case of Julian Assange, it's outrageous. And we know those things. It's just totally outrageous. Knowing whether the the Illuminati have scaly skin or not is irrelevant. You know, like it doesn't matter. It's just what we do know is there is corruption going on.
No, you're right, Steve. That's a very good point, you know. There's enough bizarre things happening that we know are true.
You've got to know the truth, and just the truth is absolutely critical. That's why they're going after Julian Assange. They're not going after others, right?
Yeah.
You know, the corporate journalists, they're being well paid, but the people who tell the truth are the ones being persecuted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But a lot of the journalists, well, John Pilger's been on independent for, ever since, more or less ever since I've known his name, because the mainstream won't give him a job, basically.
Yeah, that's right.
Good enough to have made a success out of what he does, but he's, one of the excellent ones. There's also Chris Hedges.
Can I ask you a question? Do you remember that time when John Pilger appeared on Q&A? And he appeared once. They were talking about Australian soldiers in Afghanistan, right? And he's never ever been back since. Do you remember that?
I didn't even know about that.
He appeared on Q&A. This would have been maybe 7, 8 years ago. I'm not sure now. He appeared on Q&A, and that was the last time, because he really told the truth, right? He's never ever been back. I don't watch the show anymore either. I couldn't tell you, right? But he's never ever been back. And that show now, they get on Murdoch, Murdoch mouthpieces. They bring on government ministers. They bring on all manner of liars and distorters but he has never ever been back to that show. Yeah, probably hasn't received an invitation.
Probably, well, he won't have done. He won't have done. That'll be it. They've blocked him.
Yeah.
Yeah, they will have blocked him.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, definitely now it is extreme now, the ABC. I feel like it, at least they kind of gave the alternative view to things a little bit of time, but now it's like, no, we're not going to show any alternative stuff. We're just going to...
Every part of the ABC, which I call the Australian Bullshit Corporation, right? Every part of the ABC is completely in subservient to government, right? They can't be trusted. And shame on every one of them. Every single one.
Partly the cuts to the ABC has helped them to get to that point. So all, the good, because you can select reporters that you want more finely. They weeded out the ones that were good, but and occasionally said something that the government didn't like. They've weeded those out, I'd say.
But the other thing, Steve, the other thing is this: if they say an element of truth, right, drown it in a flood of lies, and then you don't know what the truth is anymore.
No,
because you lost confidence in it.
They used to have a science program. They still have it, as far as I know, Catalyst. Anyway, it was
Catalyst.
They sacked the whole lot because I think they didn't say that, but I think they were too truthful.
Yes, that's right.
One person, her name is Mary-Ann DeMacy, did this thing on mobile phone radiation, and she presented all this stuff. It's all factual, but the criticism was that even though it was factual, she didn't present the other side of the story. Well, there's no other side of the story other than lies.
That's right.
Ridiculous.
I remember that, Steve. Yes. And then they went to a new presenter, a new format, but they got rid of all of their staff.
Yeah, they got rid of all of them.
Science-based stories.
Now it's like a commercial channel.
Yeah, that's right. That's a good point. And you know, the other thing is, have a look at what they did to the CSIRO's climate research department, right? So this also happened a few years ago. So the CSIRO, which is the Commonwealth Scientific Investigation Research Organisation, right? So it's a government scientific research body, right? So there would have, because climate change is such a critical issue that impinges upon the interests of the corporate world, right? For obvious reasons, they went through that and they started to remove scientists who were more prone to tell the truth, to be scientific. So that's another organisation that suffered as a result of government meddling and the suppression of the truth.
It's like this COVID-19, isn't it? They should be telling us about, you know, prevention, which is boosting your immunity,
Sure.
you know, exercise, fresh
Vitamin
air,
D.
getting vitamin D, getting sunshine. That's, you know, that's what we should all be doing.
I know,
But instead,
everyone-
we're told to just isolate, you know, and
they've got the word
it
social.
makes you wonder where the money is.
Why have they included the word social? We can still speak
Yes.
on the phone. We can still, you know, why is the social word in there? It's like they want people to just not speak to each other.
I've just finished reading this book, all 500 and something pages of it. And it documents the argument that's been going now for over 200 years about the causes of modern diseases such as diabetes, obesity, coronary artery disease, I mean, you name it, all the modern diseases. And in the last 50 years, all the money in this dietary research has gone towards proving that carbohydrates are good for us. Guess what? They're not. Guess what? Right? Sugar. I mean, I guess you can all remember back in the 70s, you know, the sugar company said, I know sugar's natural and it's healthy and the brain needs it and all that nonsense. Guess what? It was all funded by, you know, the carbohydrate industry.
Yes.
And the reality is, and I actually went on this diet. It's called a ketosis diet about 4 or 5 months ago. And I couldn't believe it, because what ketosis, it turns the carbohydrate nonsense on its head. What it says is that carbohydrates are actually, and particularly refined carbohydrates, are literally poisonous. They literally spike our insulin, and they create, they make you put fat on. The only way to put fat on is by eating excess carbohydrates. If you go on a carbohydrate restricted diet, which is what I've done for the last 4 or 5 months, the weight literally falls off you, even if you overeat fat. You know, 70% of my diet now is fat and oil. And sometimes, particularly when I'm stuck at home, like I am at the moment, I overeat fats and oils. Guess what? I've gone from 94 kilos to 81 kilos.
Wow.
The weight just fell off me. So I have tested the theory, but, you know, I don't trust, you know, my anecdotal evidence. I read this document, and all it shows to you is that money speaks. You know, these people that have all this wealth can convince us of anything.
Yes. And Mary Ann DeMacy is very much on that. That's her area. And
I remember that episode. It was an episode on, it was a drug that was used to control heart disease.
Statins. To do with statins and lowering cholesterol.
Yeah. Yeah.
And most people that are on those.
And when you read, when you read this document, it confirms what Marianne de Macy said, that, you know, what we do is we create the problem with carbohydrates, and then we introduce these drugs like statins to control it. But if we attack the fundamental underlying problem and control carbohydrate, and in particular refined carbohydrate consumption, all these diseases, you know, I've talked to very learned doctor mates of mine who are open to more than just the mainstream medical stuff. They're open to acupuncture and alternate and nutrition and so forth. And I remember going up to one of them, a Chinese Australian doctor, and I said, what do you think about this ketosis diet? And he looked me in the eyes and he said, well, all my type 2 diabetic patients I've got on ketosis diets, and they're all in remission from their type 2 diabetes.
Really?
And
all of them?
We're going to be cut off again, and I think perhaps I'll have to cut off too.
Okay. Well, that's a good.
Yeah.
That's a good point to leave on.